equality.
Welcome back to it, guys. The Now Morning Show continues as we take the road to the Red House. We're talking general elections 2025. And to do that, we must look at the role of young persons in our political process. This morning, we are joined by Ariel Saunders, the former independent candidate, and Chrisette Benjamin, a youth and social development advocate, as we explore the importance of voting as a young member of Trinidad and Tobago society. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And welcome to the Now.
Thanks for having us.
An absolute delight, because when we talk about youth participating in the political process, we often hear that from the man on the street, perhaps a less informed person, and you both being under the age of 30 and being so vocal in this particular conversation, it means that we're hearing the perspective we need to. But first, we need to underscore then the importance of that youth vote. When we talk about the youth vote, we talk about persons between a certain age group perhaps. So let's outline that parameter first, and then perhaps delve into what is the significance of it. Yeah? So Ariel, tell me, who are we calling youth in this particular case?
I think we have varying definitions, and probably Chrisette could help me here, but I would rarely work with 18 to 35.
Right.
When considering young persons, we look at that age. And it's a critical voting bloc. Right, I would probably put a plug very early on to say that nationally we probably need to look at collecting data as it relates to how we vote. So while it is a typical conversation to be had that there's not a significant level of engagement among young persons, we don't really know what that looks like in terms of the actual data.
Right.
Right.
It's a feeling we're going with.
It's a feeling we're going with. It's a vibe. I mean, it manifests in different ways. But definitely we want to encourage legislators to enable the EBC to collect that data early on. Right. So putting that out there from the front. So this conversation that we're having is from our experiences in the political arena and in the systems that govern us. And I know Chris said we could certainly say that it is very important that young people vote.
Why do you think that is, Chrisette?
Well, for multiple reasons. One being, we are the generation that's going to live the longest with the consequences of all political actions. And recognizing that an elected government has the power to make or shape our quality of life, that is enough reason for young people to get involved and let their voices be heard.
Absolutely. But what about the ones that don't feel that way? Because there are echoes that we've heard every single season. My vote doesn't count. They don't care about me. I don't see the fruit of that labor, so to speak. What do we say to these persons?
Firstly, my perspective is I sort of don't blame them, because it all boils down to political efficacy, which is questioning yourself, does my political action, does my vote, does my voice actually equate to actual governments taking into account my perspective in decision making. Right. So the conversation, as he highlighted prior, really needs to focus on EBC collecting the data, or even political parties collecting the data and understanding or creating opportunities for young people to meaningfully participate. Because some may argue that participation is tokenistic. You just come for my vote and that's about it. Right. Are you really taking into consideration my perspective and how that should inform legislation and policy? Because at the end of the day, Parliament is really supposed to be about representation, legislation, and oversight. But if you're not consulting young people, then are you really making decisions that will impact the future and our present?
And if I were to add to Chrisette's point, so while we do legitimize, the feelings of many young persons who have the view that they're a bit disillusioned by the system and that the politics has really alienated them, because that is very real. It might be based on their experiences with politicians in the past. It might be based on broken promises, as we know that they generally are in politics. But then there's the other hand. There are many young people who are actively engaged in the system. I have friends who I went to school with who are councillors, who are members of parliament. And so we have to ask ourselves, what was different for them? What was different for those young persons? Am I interested significantly enough to put myself out there, to get involved in politics, to read about what's taking place? Am I interested in what's going on? Or do I believe that governance is this far removed concept from me? And that's where we kind of need to carry the conversation. How do we bring it closer to those who feel that way?
And that was going to be my question, because what I'm hearing literally on the ground and even from our exchanges is also persons who don't altogether understand the system.
Yes,
if I am not immediately moved to become a political person in terms of a councillor or actively participate in the politics as in terms of representation, do I understand what I need? How do I articulate that? What are the measurements to see that these are coming in? It sounds to me that we have an educational gap as well that we need to fill, and that is not just across the youth, but across the citizenry. So let's talk a little bit about the strategies or the opportunities therein. You may have underscored some already, but any others that we have not looked at just yet, specifically for our Trinidad and Tobago climate?
There are, most definitely. I would give kudos to the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago because they have been trying, particularly through the committee system. Ever so often, you may see a sponsored ad by a joint select committee. Well, they created an Instagram page for committees where they would put out surveys asking the public what is their opinion, because joint select committees are mandated to do inquiries on a particular issue of national concern, do the research on it, and present solutions. So that's an option. Another option is petitions, and we saw that work in the context of Trinidad and Tobago, particularly via the Candlelight movement, where they got a lot of signatures, over 100,000, in terms of advocating for Parliament to look into putting action to protect women and girls. So those are two possibilities that I'll put forward.
There are many youth-led and youth-serving organizations as well. I was a part of several. There's the National Youth Council, there was Trinidad Votes Matter. There are organizations that are actively involved, but I would really look at the personal level. Listen, it's not about, being able to articulate yourself in any particular way, right? It's about just becoming involved, just, becoming informed about what's going on, putting yourself out there, as simple as meeting a candidate, find out what their plans are for you, asking them, how could they include some of these thoughts and suggestions that you have. Now, it's election season, they're in your area, challenge them, make an effort to go to the office of the Member of Parliament, make an effort to go to the Parliament building, and there are many other avenues. Join a community council, join a youth group. There are many avenues for us to become a little more civically engaged, if you want to put it that way. So on the personal level, we have to say, listen, this is something that affects me. I remember growing up, we would hear, you all are the future, you all are the leaders of tomorrow. Listen, I'm pushing 30 right now. And many of the leaders I grew up seeing now out of the political landscape. So that means to me that, well, it's our time now. This is the future that was being spoken about several years ago. And am I prepared to be an active participant in that future? Or will I, dress back, as we say, and let people build a future for me that I will have to live in?
I think that's a crucial point or critical point that was missed. The fact that we can actively determine what our future looks like. That sense of I have no control is definitely something I hear often. But we also hear that people are much more receptive to their peers and influencers. How do we feel about the actual influence that social media and these spaces can have on the political sphere? Because there is a lot of access, there is a bit of exchange in a more immediate way, but then there is a lot of unreliable information coming through. How do we navigate those spaces as younger persons as well? And perhaps on the younger side, the more mature might have their methods, but what do we do for our first-time voters, for example?
Yeah, so as Chris and I was having a conversation about the social media.
I know this one struck a chord in both went.
As we know, social media is hot these days with a lot of persons coming forward. So it's definitely a space for activism, right? It's an easy platform to navigate, to share messages that you have and to find communities of support. Right. I would say, my point earlier of actually becoming a little more engaged, of reading, of paying attention to what's going on becomes important. And that's how you discern what is old talk from what is actually valuable information. Now, all these agencies that Chris had mentioned earlier, they have similar social media pages. And there are some influencers who, and I appreciate you guys, who take the time to educate persons in the public domain on issues that affect them, and they do it in a way that is relatable to different levels of persons within the society. I try my best to engage with my communities on Facebook and on Instagram and whatnot, and I think that's the level that we need to go. And that Chris said, if you go on social media, Chris said, is there educating persons about the value of their vote, educating persons as to why they should join, get involved, and actually holding their hands through the process.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think that, or have you seen the actual results of that being positive, that the impact is there to continue to do so?
On a personal account, I did a series for local government election, and I can say definitely within my constituency of Miaro, that did motivate persons to go out and vote. So honestly, we do have the power, but we need more young people to recognize the power that they have in terms of influencing and creating that change, because your voice could actually make a difference. Just going, as you said, going to your MP's office. And just to put a plug there, during the COVID-19 period, 2 university students from the University of the West Indies had a campaign called Write to MP, where hundreds of young people wrote letters to their MP stating or asking them to work hand in hand with all members of parliament to address issues that are affecting young women and girls in the country. So it definitely takes one person to put something forward, and other young people will follow.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to give any sort of advice, particularly from the perspective of someone who has actively put their foot into things, and for those who are willing to hold the hands of our citizenry, what do we want our youth to take away this morning?
This election is one where young people will make a difference. It's an election where you matter, your vote matters. And listen, politicians are walking through your communities right now. Capitalize on the opportunity to engage with them and to hold them accountable. I even want to say at this point that we need to also ask the political parties who have been engaging young people to engage them meaningfully. So it's not just about giving them a seat at the table, but allowing them to speak at that table and taking their views and opinions into consideration. Sometimes we see within the political organizations that you must toe the line for a couple of years to be able to have that voice and view, but there are young people who are pushing that narrative and challenging that. And so I say to young people, if you're not satisfied by the way our current political system operates or politics is practiced, then you get involved and change it. You flood the system because your vote, your voice matters. And especially in this election, you're required to make a difference. Krista, I'll give you
I share the same sentiments, and definitely I saw a conversation on social media where young people were asking, so who to vote for? I would propose 3 questions that you can ask yourself to assess who is the best candidate or who is the best party. Look at the functions of parliament legislation. Does this person have the ability to legislate on behalf of my constituency in terms of representation? Ask the candidate, what are the strategies you're going to put in place, to connect and get the views of your constituency. When it comes to oversight, what strategies are you going to put in place to hold the government accountable for all their actions? Once you speak and you get that opportunity to ask the candidate that, you get the opportunity to decide if this person is best for you or if they're not best for you.
And with that, I look forward to post-conversations as we will continue on this road to the Red House with these sorts of conversations and more right here on the Now Morning Show.